The luxury hotel was always full of noise in the evenings, but underneath all of that, there was also a strange kind of calmness. People walked around in polished shoes, holding clipboards, checking lights, arranging tables, and fixing flower stands. Yet in the middle of all the movement, a young waitress moved quietly from one side of the hall to the other, almost unnoticed by everyone around her. Her name was Lena, and she had been working at the hotel for more than a year. She was one of those people who did their work without ever drawing attention. She listened more than she spoke, and she always stayed focused, no matter how loud things got around her. Some guests barely looked at her face long enough to remember her, but she didn't mind. She preferred keeping to herself. Talking too much sometimes led to questions, and questions often led to places she didn't want to go. That evening, the grand ballroom looked brighter than usual. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. The floor was polished so well it almost shined like a mirror, and rows of tables were dressed in white cloth, tall glasses, and silver that reflected every bit of light. A big corporate event was scheduled to take place there. Important companies, famous speakers, and wealthy guests were expected to attend. Everyone was already stressed, even though the event had not begun yet. Lena carried a tray across the room, placing water bottles and glasses on each table. She moved with a rhythm she had practiced for months. She didn't need anyone to supervise her. She knew exactly where things went, what needed to be aligned, and how the room should look before the guests arrived. Her supervisor trusted her more than many others, because she never complained and never arrived late. But if someone paid attention to her face that day, they would have noticed something different. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the stage at the front of the room. And on the stage, standing quietly under the soft lights, was a beautiful grand piano. It was white, polished, and elegant. The kind of piano that belonged in a concert hall rather than a hotel event. It looked almost untouched. A few of the staff had passed by it earlier, tapping its cover or joking about how fancy it looked, but no one gave it real attention. No. One except Lena. She tried not to look at it too long. Every time her gaze fell on the piano, she felt something heavy and warm in her chest, the same feeling she used to have years ago. She had learned to push it down over time, but seeing a piano always brought it back, even if she didn't want it to. A coworker brushed past her while she adjusted chairs. "Careful, Lena," he said lightly, without looking at her. He didn't mean anything by it. Everyone spoke to her that way, fast, distracted, as if she were another part of the furniture. She nodded softly in response and continued working. The hotel's event coordinator, a woman known for her short temper, was walking around with her usual stressed expression. She pointed at the flower arrangements, told one staff member to fix the lighting, and reminded another to polish the silver holders near the stage. She moved fast, almost too fast for anyone to keep up. Lena stepped out of her path each time. She passed. The coordinator paused once to check her clipboard. "Where is the pianist?" she muttered out loud. "I need to make sure the speaker entrance music is ready." She made an annoyed sound and rushed off toward the lobby. Lena felt her stomach twist the moment she heard the word pianist. She lowered her eyes and kept arranging the napkins at her table. She didn't want her face to show anything. She had once dreamed of being the one to play at a place like this. When she was younger, she studied piano every day. She practiced before sunrise and even skipped meals to fit in extra hours. Music was the only thing she felt she truly understood. It made sense to her in a way nothing else ever had. But after her father passed away, life changed in a way she could not control. Bills piled up. Her mother grew tired and sick. Her brother was too young to help. Lena had no choice but to find work, and quickly. Dreams didn't pay electricity bills. Dreams didn't buy medicine. So she left everything behind. took the first job she could find, and never looked back. At least, that was what she tried to do. The piano on the stage seemed to whisper at her every time she passed by. It felt like a part of her she had shut away was reaching out again, asking to be remembered. She continued her work, though her movements were slower every time the piano came into view. At one point, she paused near the stage to fix the placement of the silver stands. Her hand shook slightly as she reached up, and she quickly pulled it back to her side. The hall was quiet for a moment. Some staff members took a short break near the back, sipping water and chatting. Lena stayed near the stage, pretending to adjust the cloth on the podium, even though it was already perfect. A deep voice came from behind her. "Beautiful instrument, isn't it?" She turned slightly to see an older server standing next to her. He had been working at the hotel longer than anyone. He smiled kindly and wiped sweat from his forehead. "They say the company paid extra to bring this one," he added. "Something about making a nice impression on international guests." He chuckled softly. "As if the guests will even know the difference." Lena smiled faintly. She didn't trust her voice enough to respond, so she simply nodded. The man stretched his back and headed off to help another waiter. Once he left, Lena let her fingers drift slightly over the piano's edge, not touching the keys, just feeling the smooth surface of the lid. It felt cold at first, but familiar. She closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost hear the music she used to play. She could remember the exact feeling of sitting at a piano bench for hours, losing herself in melodies that only she understood. But like every time before, she pulled her hand back quickly and stepped away. Work was work. She was not there to dream. By late afternoon, the tension in the room grew heavier. Several senior staff members paced up and down the hall. The coordinator snapped at anyone who moved too slowly. The decorators rushed back and forth, carrying last-minute items. The kitchen sent food out to the serving tables in perfect timing. It was almost time. Lena moved to the back of the room to fill more trays. She balanced glasses with a calmness that surprised even herself. Her hands never trembled when she worked, only when she thought about music. The coordinator suddenly stormed into the room holding her phone. "This cannot be happening," she shouted. Everyone turned to look at her. "The pianist's flight has been delayed. He won't be here for at least 2 hours." She rubbed her temples and let out a frustrated sigh. "We can't welcome high-profile guests without entrance music. This is a disaster." Staff members exchanged looks. Some murmured concerns. A few joked quietly among themselves, trying to lighten the tension. But no one had a solution. One of the chefs walked by, carrying a box of pastries. He glanced at Lena, then at the piano, and smirked. "Why not ask her?" he said in a joking tone. "She stares at that thing more than she stares at her own reflection." "Eh?" Couple of staff members laughed. Lena felt her face warm with embarrassment. She lowered her eyes immediately, but the coordinator, who was desperate for any idea, turned sharply toward Lena. "You? Can you play?" The question hit Lena like a sudden gust of wind. She froze completely. Her fingers tightened around the tray she was carrying. She didn't want everyone looking at her. She didn't want to be the center of anything, but the coordinator stepped closer. "Well, do you know how to play even something simple? We just need background music until the real pianist arrives." Lena swallowed hard. She could feel every pair of eyes on her. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears. "A little," she said. Softly. It was the truth. But it sounded so small. The coordinator gestured toward the piano. "Show me." Lena wished she could disappear. She wished the ground would open and swallow her whole. But there was no escape. She set the tray down on a table and slowly walked toward the stage. Every step felt heavier than the last, She climbed the stairs to the small platform and stopped beside the piano. Her hands trembled. She hadn't played in so long. Her fingers felt stiff, unfamiliar. The coordinator crossed her arms, waiting. The staff members gathered quietly behind her, watching with curiosity. Lena took a deep breath and lifted the piano lid. The keys looked cleaner than snow. They seemed to glow under the warm lights. She sat slowly on the bench, feeling the old, familiar weight of memory press against her. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she let herself touch the piano. Lena's fingers rested lightly on the keys, and for a moment she felt as if time stopped. The hall, the noise, the nervous eyes watching her, everything faded. All she could hear was her own breathing, uneven and shaky. She didn't know if she remembered how to play anything well enough. She didn't know if her hands would move the same way they once did. But the coordinator was waiting. Everyone was waiting. She pressed a single key softly. The note rang out, gentle and pure. It startled her at first, as if she had forgotten how real a piano could sound. Her shoulders relaxed a little. She pressed another key, then another. Her fingers moved with caution, like someone stepping on stones across a river for the first time in years. The staff behind her stayed quiet. No one made a joke or whispered. They simply watched, unsure of what would happen. Lena took another breath and let her hands fall into a familiar pattern. She began to play a small, simple melody, one she used to warm up with when she was a teenager. It was nothing complicated, just a gentle sequence of rising notes. But something shifted in the room the moment she played it. The coordinator's stern face softened slightly. A server lowered his drink tray without realizing it. Someone near the back whispered, "Wait, she can actually play?" Lena didn't look at anyone. She kept her eyes on the keys. Her fingers slowly grew steadier, more confident. The sound grew smoother. The melody flowed out of her like water slipping past stones. When she finished the short tune, she pulled her hands back quickly, as if she had touched something too hot. The coordinator blinked. "Do you know more than that?" Lena hesitated. "A little," she repeated quietly. A little was an understatement. But she didn't know how to explain that without sounding like she was bragging. The coordinator exhaled, frustrated but also relieved. "We don't have a choice." "Fine. You'll play during guest arrival. Just soft music. Nothing too intense. Can you handle that?" Lena nodded, though she wasn't sure if she truly could. "Good," the coordinator said, already moving on. "We start in less than an hour. Please stay near the stage." Lena stood up from the bench. Her legs felt a little weak. She lowered the piano lid gently and stepped away, hoping her face didn't show how shaken she felt inside. As she walked off the stage, some coworkers gave her curious looks. A few seemed impressed. Others looked amused, as if trying to understand how a quiet waitress suddenly knew how to play a grand piano. One young server approached her. "Hey, that was pretty amazing," he said. "Didn't know you had that in you." Lena smiled politely, but didn't respond. Compliments always felt too heavy for her to carry. She returned to setting up the last few tables, though her movements felt different now. A part of her mind kept replaying the sound of the piano. Another part kept replaying the moment the coordinator told her she would perform. Perform. The word itself made her palms sweat. She wasn't a performer anymore. She was just a worker, trying to support her family. But tonight, she had no choice. As the event's starting time approached, the ballroom grew more tense. The lights were adjusted again. The doors leading to the hotel lobby opened and closed every few seconds as staff rushed in and out. The scent of polished wood mixed with the smell of warm appetizers drifting from the kitchen. Lena placed herself at the side of the stage, waiting. She held her hands together, trying to make them stop trembling. She told herself it was just temporary, just until the real pianist arrived. But deep inside, a quiet fear mixed with an old longing. She had wanted this once, desperately. She had dreamed of playing in places like this. She had imagined people listening, watching, appreciating. Now that it was happening, even in this unexpected and stressful way, she didn't know what to feel. The coordinator approached her. The guests will enter in 5 minutes. Just play something calm. You don't need to impress anyone. Just fill the silence. Fill the silence. Lena nodded, though she knew music was never just filling silence for her. The coordinator hurried away again, shouting instructions at someone near the door. Lena stepped onto the stage slowly, careful not to trip on the hem of her uniform. She sat on the bench again, lifting the piano lid with gentler hands this time. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She swallowed hard. The ballroom doors opened. The first group of guests walked in well-dressed, confident, chatting softly as they entered. Several glanced at the stage with polite curiosity. Lena lowered her eyes and began to play. The melody she chose was slow and warm. It flowed softly beneath the chatter of guests. At first, no one reacted. People continued walking, greeting each other, finding their seats. But after a few moments, some began to pause. Her playing was not flashy, not loud, but it had something the room was not expecting. Her hands moved with a softness that came from years of private practice, hands that once played until they ached. Each note carried a quiet emotion she didn't know she was releasing. A man near the front slowed his steps. A woman whispered to her partner and nodded toward the stage. Someone recorded a short video on their phone. Still, Lena didn't look up. She couldn't. If she did, the fear would come back and suffocate her. More guests arrived, and the room filled with soft conversations and the gentle clinking of glasses. But beneath all that noise, her music floated. It touched ears even when people weren't listening closely. It reached them without meaning to. Behind her, a few staff members watched from the sides of the room. "Is that really her?" One whispered. "I thought she was just a server. She plays better than the last pianist we had." Their whispers didn't reach Lena clearly, but she felt the change in the room's energy. She continued to play, moving from one melody to another without stopping. The hotel lights reflected softly off the piano's surface, creating a glow around her hands. Sweat formed on her palms, but she wiped nothing away. She just played. Eventually, she allowed herself one small glance at the room. The view startled her. People were watching her, not all of them, but enough to catch her breath. Some had turned their chairs slightly toward the piano. Some stood near the entrance, listening before moving further inside. A few even clapped quietly after she finished a piece. She was not supposed to stand out tonight. She was supposed to be invisible, like always, but for the first time in years, she wasn't. Her heart raced. She looked down again quickly. The coordinator approached the stage at one point, looking both stressed and surprised. She leaned in close and whispered, "Don't stop. You're doing great. Just keep playing." Lena nodded, her hands never leaving the keys. She played the way someone breathes, without thinking too hard, just letting instinct guide her. Minutes stretched into an hour. Her arms grew tired, but she didn't dare stop. The room felt too fragile, too expectant. Every time she considered pausing, she saw another guest looking her way, smiling softly or nodding in appreciation. She had never been surrounded by so many people while playing. It felt overwhelming, but it also awakened something inside her, something she thought she had buried long ago. When the hired pianist finally arrived, more than an hour late, He entered the room quietly. He expected to hear silence or recorded music. Instead, he found a young waitress playing the grand piano with a grace that made him stop in the doorway. He didn't interrupt her. He didn't announce his arrival. He simply stood there and listened. Lina didn't know he was watching her. She didn't know anyone except the staff and nearby guests had paid attention. She played as if she were somewhere else entirely. The late pianist slowly approached the coordinator. "Is she the replacement?" He whispered. The coordinator sighed. "She's the waitress. You're the one who is supposed to be here." The man blinked in surprise. "She plays beautifully." "Yes, I noticed," the coordinator replied. Meanwhile, Lina had no idea her performance had caught so much attention. She was lost in the familiar weight of the keys. She had forgotten her fear for a moment, forgotten her job, her worries, her exhaustion. When she finally reached the end of a long piece, her hands slowed until the last note faded into the air. She lifted her fingers gently. For a second, the room felt strangely still. Then soft clapping rose from several tables. Lina's heart jumped. She stood quickly, bowing her head slightly, unsure what else to do. She felt heat rush to her cheeks. The real pianist walked toward her with a kind expression. "That was beautiful," he said quietly, so no one else would hear. "Would you mind continuing a little longer? I think the guests would rather listen to you." Lina stared at him in disbelief. "But you're a musician," he said simply. The coordinator, for once, didn't interrupt. Lina looked down at her hands. They trembled, but not from fear anymore. She sat again, and as she placed her fingers on the keys, she realized something had changed, something important, something she didn't yet understand. All she knew was that she wasn't just filling silence anymore. Lina's fingers floated over the keys once more, though this time the weight in her chest felt lighter. The applause had faded, but the warmth of it stayed with her longer than she expected. She didn't raise her head to look at anyone who clapped. She didn't need to. The sound alone filled something inside her that had been empty for years. She began to play again, choosing a melody she used to practice late at night when the rest of her family slept. It was gentle and steady, like a quiet memory. The notes carried through the ballroom with a softness that wrapped around the room, almost like a blanket. People who had been talking lowered their voices. Some turned their chairs a little more toward the stage. Others simply closed their eyes for a moment, letting the music settle over them. Lina didn't notice any of it. She was somewhere else now, caught between the past and the present, in a place where only the piano existed. As she played, she remembered the old apartment where she grew up. She remembered the small keyboard her father had saved up to buy for her, even though money was always tight. She remembered how he used to sit beside her, tapping his foot out of rhythm, but smiling anyway. She remembered her mother standing at the kitchen doorway, listening quietly while pretending to cook. She also remembered the day everything changed, the day her father didn't come home, the day she realized music couldn't save her family from the world outside. But tonight, the piano felt like a door opening again, not to the past, but to something new. Behind her, the room had changed without her noticing. The hired pianist, the one who had come late, stood off to the side watching her play. His expression was calm, almost respectful, as if he understood exactly what was happening without needing an explanation. The coordinator, who was always rushing, stood still for once. Her phone hung loosely at her side, forgotten. She watched Lina with an expression caught between confusion and admiration. A group of foreign guests whispered among themselves, "She plays like someone with professional training," one said quietly. "But she is a waitress?" Another replied, "It doesn't matter. Listen to her." Across the room, a businessman leaned against the bar, holding his glass, but not drinking from it. His eyes were fixed on the stage, where Lina played without stopping, pouring out emotions. She had locked away for too long. A woman near the front dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Her husband glanced at her in surprise. "It's just music," he said softly. "No," she whispered. "It's something else." Meanwhile, Lina played on. She didn't know what people were feeling. She didn't know who was listening or why. She just played because she finally could. Her hands flowed over the keys more confidently now, moving through songs she had never played for anyone before. She transitioned from one melody to the next so smoothly that it almost felt like she was telling a story only she understood. Somewhere in the back of the room, 2 young staff members stood watching. "I never thought she had so much talent." One of them whispered, "She's always so quiet. Maybe we just never noticed." Yeah, maybe. The older server who had spoken to Lina earlier stood a little apart from the others. He smiled softly, pride shining in his eyes. "She was meant for this," he whispered to no one in particular. Time passed without anyone keeping track. The ballroom lights glowed warmly, reflecting off glasses and silverware. The chatter of guests had softened into a comfortable hum, blending with Lina's music. At one point, the late pianist walked up to the coordinator again. "Should I take over now?" he asked gently. The coordinator looked at him, then at Lina. She hesitated. I don't know. They seemed to like her." He nodded with understanding. "She's playing from somewhere deep. It's rare." The coordinator exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "Let her continue for now." Lina had no idea she had been given permission to keep playing. She just felt the music pushing her forward. Her hands grew tired, but her heart wouldn't. Let her stop. Every note felt like it carried something important, something she couldn't put into words. Then, almost without warning, the music softened into a slower piece, one she had learned during one of the hardest years of her life. It was a song she used to play when she couldn't sleep, when she felt like the world was too heavy. Playing it now brought back those memories, but it also gave her a sense of release she hadn't expected. Her fingers trembled lightly through the final notes. The room grew so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. When she finished, she let her hands rest in her lap. She didn't move for several seconds. She didn't even breathe. Then she heard its soft applause rising, growing stronger, spreading across the room. Lina stood automatically, her head bowed slightly. She didn't know if she should smile or stay still, so she simply gave a small nod. A man approached the stage, someone who looked important from the way others cleared a path for him. He stopped a few feet away and smiled kindly. "Your music is beautiful," he said. His voice was gentle, respectful. "You play with emotion, not just skill." Lina blinked, unsure how to respond. She bowed her head again. Another guest asked, "Where did you learn to play?" She hesitated. "At home," she answered softly. "At home?" the woman said, surprised. "Not at a conservatory?" Lina shook her head. "No." The woman seemed even more impressed. "Well, thank you for playing for us tonight." Lina didn't know what else to say, so she simply whispered, "Thank you." As guests moved back to their tables and conversations resumed, Lina stepped off the stage quietly. Her hands were cold, and her heart felt both heavy and full at the same time. She wanted to hide for a moment, just to breathe. So she walked behind the curtain near the stage and leaned against the wall. The air there felt cooler. Her legs felt shaky. For a moment, she closed her eyes. She had not realized how much she missed playing, how much she needed it. She heard footsteps approaching and opened her eyes. The late pianist stood in front of her. "You play beautifully," he said again, this time with a gentle smile. "I hope you haven't forgotten that." Lina lowered her gaze. I haven't played in a long time. You wouldn't know it, he replied. Your hands remember. She looked down at her fingers. They were slightly red from playing so long. I don't know if I should keep going, she admitted. I'm just a worker here. The pianist shook his head. Tonight, you're a musician. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. He wasn't saying it to make her feel good. She could tell he meant it. Before he walked away, he added softly, If you want, I can accompany you later. But only if you're comfortable. Lena's eyes widened. Me? With you? He chuckled. Why not? Music is for everyone. She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded Dot when she stepped back out into the ballroom. Several guests smiled at her warmly. A few nodded in appreciation. Even some staff members gave her encouraging looks. But something unexpected happened next. Tall man in a suit, someone who seemed to be one of the night's important guests, walked up to her with a serious expression. I want you to know, he said in a steady voice, that your music reminded me of something I had forgotten. Something important. Lena blinked, unsure how to respond. The man continued, People like you, people who carry emotion in their hands. You are rare. He placed a gentle hand over his heart. Thank you. Then he walked away, leaving her with more questions than answers. The rest of the evening, Lena felt the weight of what had just happened. She was supposed to blend into the background, but instead, she had become part of the night in a way she never expected. She played a few more pieces, this time with more control, more calmness. The pianist occasionally watched from nearby, giving her a nod of encouragement. She still felt nervous every time someone looked at her, but it didn't stop her hands from moving. Something inside her refused to let her pull away now. Later, during a short break, she stood near the edge of the room, holding a glass of water. Her hands were stiff, but her eyes were bright. A coworker approached. You okay? He asked. Lena nodded. Yes, just tired. Tired for a good reason, he said with a smile. Everyone's talking about you. She felt her cheeks warm. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Trouble? He laughed. You made the night better. She didn't know what else to say. She simply smiled softly and looked back at the stage. The piano sat there quietly now, its lid reflecting. The warm lights. It didn't look intimidating anymore. It looked like a friend she had finally reunited with Dot as the evening continued. Lena realized something slowly, quietly. The world she had shut the door on years ago had found its way back to her Dot, and for the first time in a long time. She didn't push it away. The morning after the luxury event felt strangely quiet for her. She woke up before the alarm, her mind still filled with sounds from the night before. It was almost like the piano keys were still moving under her fingers, even though she was now just sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. Everything that had happened felt both real and unreal at the same time. She had played in front of so many people, in such a grand place, and they had listened. To her like she was someone important. It almost felt like she had stepped out of her own life for a moment and lived someone else's. She got ready for work the same way she always did, but she moved slower. She tried not to think too much, but her mind kept pulling her back to that moment when the hall fell silent, and the only thing that could be heard was her playing. She remembered the way the last note hung in the air, the way the guests had turned their heads, the way her hands trembled after she finished, and then the faces. So many surprised eyes watching her, like they were seeing her for the first time Dot as she walked to the restaurant. The city felt different, not because the streets had changed, but because she had. Her thoughts carried a quiet excitement, but also fear. She didn't know what would happen now. She had never asked for attention, never asked for anyone to look at her. She had only played because the piano called her, because music had always been her way of breathing. But now others had seen her. They had noticed. And she didn't know what that meant. When she reached the back door of the restaurant, she took a deep breath and walked in, hoping everything would be normal, hoping the night before had slipped from everyone's mind. But the moment she stepped inside, she realized that was impossible. The kitchen staff froze when they saw her. Someone let out a low whistle. Someone else smiled like they had been waiting for her. "There she is," one of the cooks said softly, "the star of the night." She felt her cheeks warm. She shook her head quickly. "Please don't start," she murmured. "I really don't want everyone to make a big thing out of it." But they already had. One of the servers walked up to her, holding his phone. "Have you seen this?" he asked, turning the screen toward her. Her stomach dropped. On the screen was a video of her playing. The moment she sat at the grand piano in that huge room, the crowd watching her in disbelief. She blinked fast, her breath stuck in her chest. "Who?" she started. "Someone at the event posted it," the server said. "It's everywhere now. Look at the views." Her heart hammered. She didn't want to look, but her eyes couldn't help it. Thousands. Tens of thousands. She stepped back without meaning to. No, no, no. This wasn't supposed to happen. The server lowered the phone. "It's not bad," he said kindly. "People love it. They're talking about how unbelievable it was. How a waitress played like a professional." But that didn't comfort her. If anything, it made her chest feel tighter. What if the owner sees it? She whispered, "Why would that be bad?" Someone asked, but she didn't answer. She knew the owner wasn't unkind, but she also knew he didn't like surprises. He liked things to stay neat, predictable, controlled. She had stepped out of lying, even if she hadn't meant to. She changed into her uniform quickly and tried to start her day as if nothing was different. She took orders, carried trays, wiped tables. But everywhere she walked, she felt eyes following her. Not in a bad way, more like curiosity, more like admiration. But it still made her uncomfortable. Around lunchtime, the manager called her into the office. Her hands felt cold as she knocked on the door. "Come in," he said. She stepped inside. He looked up from his desk with a calm expression, though she could tell he had been expecting her. "So," he said slowly. "Quite a night you had," she swallowed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "It just happened. I didn't plan it. Someone asked me to play, and I didn't want to cause trouble." He raised a hand gently. "Relax. You're not in trouble." She blinked. "I'm not?" He shook his head. "Of course not. I watched the video. Honestly, I couldn't believe it was you. You played beautifully." Her shoulders loosened a little, but the fear didn't disappear. "Still," he continued, "we need to be aware of what's happening. People are calling here, reporters, bloggers. Some are asking if you're available for interviews." Her heart thudded again. "No, please, no. I don't want any attention." He studied her for a moment. "Why? You have what most people dream of. You have talent. And now people have seen it." She shook her head. "It's not that. I don't want to be treated differently. I'm not ready for all of this." He nodded slowly. "All right. I'll try to keep things calm for you. But understand, you might not be able to avoid everything. The video is spreading fast." She lowered her eyes. "I understand. For now," he said, "just do your work. If anyone tries to bother you, tell me." She nodded and stepped out of the office, feeling both relieved and overwhelmed. The rest of the day passed in a blur. People whispered. Customers asked if she was the girl from the video. Some even tried to talk to her about it, but she politely moved away each time. She wanted to disappear, even though deep inside, a small part of her felt proud. She had played something meaningful, something she had always kept hidden. And now the world knew. After her shift, she walked home slowly. The streets had grown quieter, and the cold evening air helped clear her mind. She needed to breathe. She needed space. When she reached her small apartment, she sat at her old upright piano, the one she had bought second-hand years ago. It had scratches, chips, and keys that stuck sometimes, but it had always been there for her. She placed her fingers gently on the keys. For a moment, she just sat there. No cameras, no crowd, no pressure. Then she played. Not loudly, not perfectly, just softly, letting each note fall where it wanted. The music wrapped around her like a warm blanket, reminding her why she loved it. She played until her breathing slowed, until her hands stopped shaking, until everything inside her felt steadier. But just as she finished, her phone buzzed. She reached for it reluctantly. A message. From an unknown number. She hesitated, then opened. Hello. I was at the event last night. Your playing was extraordinary. I would like to speak with you, not as a reporter, but as someone who believes you deserve a real chance. Please contact me. Her heart skipped. A real chance. She stared at the message, unsure what to think, unsure whether to trust it, unsure if she even wanted something like that. But she knew one thing. Her life was changing, and she couldn't stop it now. She set the phone down, leaned back, and closed her eyes. Part of her felt afraid of what might come next. But another part, a small but growing part, felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And that hope, quiet and fragile, would guide her into the next chapter she never expected to live. The next morning came with a soft gray sky, the kind that made everything feel slower and quieter. She sat at the small table in her kitchen, holding a warm cup of tea, but not drinking it. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the message she had received the night before. She didn't know who had sent it. She didn't know if it was something real, or just another thing that would make her more nervous. She had stared at the phone for a long time, wondering whether she should respond. But she hadn't. She didn't trust herself to make such a big decision so quickly. Still, as she sat there, she couldn't deny that a small part of her felt curious. She had never imagined anyone noticing her, let alone someone offering her a chance at something bigger. It felt strange, almost unreal. But the thought lingered in her mind, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. After finishing her tea, she got ready for work. She moved calmly, but deep inside she felt a tiny knot of worry. She didn't know what the day would bring. She didn't know what people would say. She didn't even know if she wanted to face anyone at all. But she didn't have a choice. Life had to continue, no matter how overwhelming things felt. When she arrived at the restaurant, she noticed something different. People were quieter when she walked past. They watched her closely, but not in a rude way. More like they were waiting for something, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to explain what she planned to do. She kept her eyes down, hoping they wouldn't ask too many questions. But as she walked into the main dining area, she saw a man standing near the counter, looking around like he was searching for someone. His posture was calm, but the way he dressed and the way he carried himself suggested he wasn't just an ordinary customer. When he noticed her, his eyes softened. "You're her, right?" he asked. She stopped walking. I'm not sure who you mean." He smiled gently. "The pianist from the video. The waitress who played at the event." Her stomach tightened. She forced a small nod. "I've been trying to find you," he said. "I came to talk about your music." She didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to turn around and run back into the kitchen. Another part of her wanted to hear what he had to say. But before she could decide, her manager walked over. "Sir, can I help you?" the manager asked politely. Yes, the man replied. I'm here for her. He nodded toward her. The manager gave her a questioning look. She felt her cheeks warm again. She shook her head quickly. I didn't ask anyone to come, she said quietly. The man stepped forward. My name is not important right now, he said, but I work with different organizations that support new musicians. And your performance, it was something special. I watched the video many times. I could feel something honest in your playing. I'm not here to pressure you. I just want to talk. Just a conversation. Her heart beat faster. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if she was ready for anything he was saying. But before she could answer, the manager stepped in. Let's go somewhere private, he said. We don't want to disturb customers. They walked to the back room, and she sat on a small chair with her hands folded nervously. The man sat across from her. I know this is a lot, he began, and I know you didn't ask for attention, but you have something rare, something people don't see often. You play with emotion, with honesty. That's what makes a true musician, not just skill, heart. She shook her head slightly. I don't know if I want any of this. I didn't play to be noticed. I just played because they needed music. He nodded gently. I understand. But sometimes life gives you chances you don't plan for. I'm not asking for a decision now. I just want you to think about it. There are schools, programs, small performances you could explore. No pressure, no contracts, just possibilities. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly. The idea of being on stage, of being seen by many people, scared her. But the idea of playing again, truly playing, touched something inside. Her that she had almost forgotten. I don't know, she whispered. That's all right, he said softly. You don't have to know yet. He stood up and placed a card on the table. If you ever want to talk, call me. Even if it's weeks from now, or months. She stared at the card. It looked simple, clean, harmless. But it felt heavy in her hands, heavy with possibility. After he left, she sat there in silence. Her manager stayed beside her. What are you thinking? He asked. She exhaled slowly. I don't know if I can handle all this. I'm just a waitress. This world, it's not mine. He gave her a thoughtful look. You're a waitress, yes. But that's not all you are. You have a gift. A real one. Don't hide it forever. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Everything inside her felt tangled and confusing. The next few days were difficult. More people came to the restaurant. Some were customers. Some were people who had watched the video. A few tried to talk to her directly. Some simply stared. She tried to avoid all of them. The attention made her chest feel tight, like she couldn't breathe. But every night, when she returned home, she found herself sitting at the piano again. Her hands played without thinking. And each time she played, she remembered how the hall had felt that night. She remembered the way the crowd had gone silent. She remembered the feeling of being seen, not as a server, but as someone who carried something meaningful. One night, as she played a soft tune, her mother opened the door quietly. She watched her daughter for a long moment, then stepped inside. You? Haven't played like this in years? Her mother said gently. She stopped and looked over. I'm just trying to clear my mind. Her mother walked closer. I saw the video. She blinked. You? What? How? A friend sent it to me, her mother said, sitting beside her. You looked alive. More alive than I've seen. You in a very long time. She lowered her gaze. It's too much attention. I don't want it. Her mother placed a hand on her arm. I understand. But maybe this is a sign. Maybe music is still part of you. Maybe it always was, she swallowed. But what if I'm not good enough? Her mother smiled softly. You don't have to be the best. You just have to love what you do. And I know you love music. The words settled into her heart gently. That night, she picked up the card the man had left. She stared at it for a long time. Her hand trembled slightly. She wasn't sure if calling him was the right choice. She wasn't sure if she could handle a new path. But she also knew she couldn't keep running from herself. She didn't call him that night, but she didn't throw the card away either. And that alone said more than she realized. She placed the card on the piano, where she would see it every day. A quiet reminder of a door she hadn't opened yet, but might someday. When she was ready, her life was no longer the same. And deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of everything. That was about to change. The days that followed moved slowly, as if time itself was unsure which direction her life should go. Every morning she woke with the same mix of hope and fear sitting quietly inside her chest. She would touch the small card on her bedside table, not picking it up, but not ignoring it either. It had become part of her routine, though she still didn't know what it meant for her future. She went to work as usual, but work didn't feel the same anymore. People still whispered when she passed. Some smiled at her as if they were proud, even though they barely knew her. A few customers even asked if she was going to play again somewhere. She never knew how to answer. She would just nod politely and continue with her tasks. Despite all the attention, she remained shy and quiet. She didn't want to get carried away. She didn't want to imagine a life she wasn't sure she could have. She didn't want to dream too big and then fall back down. So she kept her head low, kept her hands busy, and kept her emotions steady. But one evening, as she was finishing her shift, her manager approached her with a serious look. She immediately felt a wave of worry. "Can you come to the office for a moment?" he asked. She nodded, though her stomach tightened. She followed him through the hallway and closed the door behind her as he sat down. "There's something you should know," he said gently. "The hotel wants to speak with you." Her heart dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, not at all. They actually want to offer you something." She blinked. "Offer me? What?" He leaned back in his chair. "They want you to be part of their weekend music program. A small role. You'd still be a waitress if you want, but they'd also like you to play during certain events." She stared at him, unsure what to say. Her throat felt dry. "They were impressed," he continued. "They said your performance changed the atmosphere of the entire night. They saw the reactions. They know people loved it. And they think it could bring something special to the hotel." She looked down at her hands, her mind spinning. She hadn't expected this. She had never imagined that something like this could happen because of one night, one moment, one decision she hadn't even planned. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered. Her manager nodded. "You don't have to decide right now. They said you can take your time, but I want you to think about it. Really think about it." She exhaled slowly and nodded. Later that night, she walked home under the soft glow of streetlights. Her steps were slow, peaceful, but her thoughts were loud. Every small sound felt louder in the quiet night. A car passing, the rustle of leaves, a dog barking in the distance. And somewhere underneath it all, she imagined the faint sound of piano keys. When she reached her apartment, she sat on the edge of her bed and stared at the card once again. She picked it up this time. The card felt heavier than before, as if the weight of her future had settled inside it. She ran her thumb over the name and number printed on it. Could she really do this? Could she step out of the shadows she had lived in for so long? Could she let others see the part of her she had always hidden? She placed the card on the table gently, then stood and walked toward her piano. She lifted the cover and sat down, letting her fingers rest on the keys. She closed her eyes, and she played, not the soft, uncertain tunes she had been practicing the last few days. This time she played with everything inside her. She played like she had something to say, like she needed the music to fill every corner of her small apartment. The melody shifted from soft to strong, from gentle to fierce, from fear to hope. As she played, she felt herself breathing deeper. Her thoughts grew clearer. Her doubts quieted just a little. She wasn't perfect, but she was honest. And that honesty flowed through her hands, creating something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging. When she finished, she sat still for a long moment. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from sadness, but from release. She finally felt ready to make a choice. The next morning, she woke early, her heart calm in a way she hadn't felt in weeks. She picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card, her hands trembling slightly. A man answered. "Hello?" She took a breath. "It's me," she said softly, "the waitress from the event." His voice brightened. "I'm glad you called. I'm willing to talk," she said. "I don't know what I can do. I don't know what I want yet, but I want to try. I want to see where this might go." "That's all you need to start," he replied kindly. "We can take everything one step at a time." After the call, she felt a strange warmth inside her. Not excitement exactly, not fear, something in between, something steady. Over the next few weeks, she began meeting with him. In a small group, he introduced her to teachers, musicians, mentors. They didn't pressure her, didn't judge her, didn't push her where she wasn't ready to go. Instead, they listened to her play. They encouraged her. They helped her rediscover pieces she loved but had once forgotten. She practiced after work, filling her small apartment with music night after night. Her fingers grew stronger, more confident. Her timing improved. Her emotions started flowing more naturally through every note. She still worked as a waitress, but now there was something different about her steps. Something lighter, something bright. Even her coworkers noticed. "You look happier," someone said one afternoon. Maybe she was. When the hotel confirmed her first official performance, a small weekend event, she felt nervous from head to toe. She stood backstage in her simple dress, her hands cold. She kept telling herself she didn't belong there, that she was still just a server pretending to be something else. But then she stepped into the hall. People turned their heads, not in the shocked way they had before, but in a warm way. In a hopeful way. She sat at the piano. She took a breath, and she played. The room grew quiet, not because they were surprised, but because they were listening, truly listening. Her music filled the space gently, beautifully. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't try to be anything she wasn't. She simply played from her heart. When she finished, the audience clapped softly but sincerely. It wasn't the wild applause from the night of the event. This was different. This was gentle, respectful, warm. As she stood to leave the stage, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not because she was the best, not because she had suddenly become someone important, but because she had finally allowed herself to be seen. Later that night, as she walked home under the peaceful glow of city lights, she realized something. Her life had changed, not because of the video, not because of the attention, not even because someone offered her a chance. It changed because she chose to say yes. Yes to possibility. Yes to fear. Yes to hope. Yes to herself. And the road ahead, though still uncertain, finally felt like a place she belonged. A place she could walk with a quiet strength. a place she could fill with music again. Her music. The music. That had waited inside her all along.